The reason I decided to start filming here on YouTube is because YouTube is a perfect place full of perfect people. No, you're right. It's not. YouTube is full of people who pretend to be perfect. And the last thing I wanted to do when starting to create content here on YouTube was to portray that I am the perfect mother or the perfect daughter or the perfect person or the perfect diabetic. And lately I've been filming content here on YouTube to cater to type 1 and type 2 diabetics as a 20-year diabetic myself. And I realized that a lot of my content comes off like I'm perfect. Like I eat everything the right way, I do everything the right way. I'm 100% a perfect diabetic with perfect numbers all the time. And I want to come on here and debunk that theory and explain to you guys why I take diabetes so seriously now in my 30s, whereas the past 20 years hasn't always been like that. So if you are new, welcome. My name is Olivia, and as I just mentioned, I've been a diabetic for just about 20 years. And as I also mentioned, I have not always been perfect at it. If you are coming back to my channel, welcome back. Please make sure you guys like my video. It helps push out my content to other diabetics out there. I just want to spread the word and help as many people as humanly possible. So let's get into my personal story to kind of give you a little bit background about me and my imperfect self. So I was diagnosed when I was 11 years old. My mom was a type 1 diabetic, and she was a type 1 diabetic since she was 3. So my mom unfortunately passed away in her 50s at the age of 56 due to heart disease and diabetic complications. Growing up, as kind of the even prior to, my diabetic story, my mom was diabetic way before I was, and I grew up in a diabetic household. We didn't have much sugar in there. We all kind of followed a diabetic diet. But my mom was not very strict on herself. I remember us going out to eat, and my mom just had the mentality of diabetics can eat whatever they want as long as they take the insulin for it after. And that was how I was raised. That's all I thought. But my mom constantly had severe low blood sugar spells and high blood sugar spells to the point where EMTs were out at our house a few times a week, especially towards the end of her life. And due to her irresponsible ways with her diabetes, she had renal failure, she had diabetic retinopathy, she went legally blind, and she had heart disease, which unfortunately she ended up passing away from. Now, to preface, my mom and I were best friends. So losing her in my early 20s was the hardest thing I've ever been through. But looking back now as an older adult, I can see that she made a lot of mistakes in her diabetic journey that probably got her to where she ended up. So when my mom passed away, I was 21 years old. So I was a diabetic for 10 years, and I had adopted a lot of her ways. I felt that I could eat whatever I wanted, and as long as I had my insulin after. So my mom and I would regularly go out for drinks, ice cream, sugary junk, unhealthy carbs, pasta, loads of pasta, all of that good stuff. The literal person's dream. I ate whatever I wanted. I remember buying Breyer's ice cream from ShopRite like it was not a big deal. I remember eating Reese's Cups and just taking insulin after. And I didn't understand that that's not how you're supposed to do things. So my mom passed away when I'm 21. And as kind of another story to lead you up to the main story I'm working towards here, is I met my husband, now husband, when my mom passed away. He was my mom's neighbor, and he came over to say sorry for my loss after losing my mom. And shortly thereafter, we became very good friends and started dating. So in the beginning of me and my husband dating, I never told him much about diabetes. I told him I was diabetic, and he didn't ask many questions, and I didn't volunteer any information because at that point I was eating whatever I was wanting, and I was living the best life I could. I was in college, I was enjoying myself, needless to say, as most would. So a few months into dating, I was really grieving for my mom's loss, and I was really having a tough time. And one of the ways I kind of coped with that grief was I enjoyed food, which food is a great way to cure grief. And I kind of put diabetes in the back burner. I stopped taking my medication. And when I ran out of medication, I didn't want to make a doctor's appointment because I was too embarrassed to admit how poorly I've been doing managing my sugars. And I just kind of believed in the moment that it would all work itself out and everything would be fine. I didn't understand the complications that can happen from mismanaging your blood sugars. So that lasted for about 4 or 5 months where I wasn't taking my medication, and I mean at all. I wasn't taking any medication. My sugars were through the roof. I didn't have a Dexcom yet or a pump or anything like that. I did the old-fashioned finger pricks and I did self-injections, and I really wasn't doing either of those things. But all I did know was I was incredibly thirsty constantly. I was incredibly moody constantly. And after a good month or two of those symptoms, they progressed into where I was constantly feeling sick. I remember feeling out of breath. I couldn't go upstairs. I couldn't walk many steps. In all honesty, I felt like I was dying. And at that point, I knew I was so down the bunny rabbit hole of not taking good care of myself that there was no turning back. I was embarrassed to go to a doctor. I was embarrassed to go to the hospital because I didn't want to go in front of a doctor who was going to judge me for my decisions. I knew I was making a bad decision. I understood that I was grieving, and I had, underwent a huge loss, but I just felt like there was no way out but just to continue down the road, and eventually things would work themselves out. So 4 or 5 months into me mismanaging my blood sugars, I was very sick, constantly throwing up or feeling nauseous or tired. The one night, it was New Year's Day, after a full night of having a great time, New Year's Eve, eating whatever I wanted, drinking whatever I wanted, I was tired and I was spending the night at my then boyfriend's house. And I woke him up and said, "Hey, I'm not feeling well. I'm going to go back home," which was right across the street. We were neighbors. So I walked across the street. I remember walking inside and I started rooting through all of my cabinets looking for any form of insulin because, like I had said, I didn't have any anymore. I started rooting through all my drawers, opening them up, looking for any form of medicine to take because I just knew that that's why I was not feeling well. I needed to try to find some kind of medication. Well, I never found it. I eventually fell asleep on my couch and I woke up in the hospital. So in that time, I went into a diabetic coma, and from not hearing from me, my then boyfriend had his friend check in on me, who walked in and found me in a diabetic coma, which when he first walked in, he thought I was a drug addict because honestly, I don't even like to think about what my husband's friend walked in on, what I was wearing, what I looked like, what I was doing. All I know is he found me unconscious. He had to call EMTs out, and they took me to the hospital. My sugar was in the 900s, and they had to put me in a medically induced coma to help my body heal itself for quite some time. When I came out of it, I was in acute renal failure from my sugars being so mismanaged for so long. And I remember not being able to feel my hands and my feet, which neuropathy. And it was such a scary time in my life. And it takes a lot for me to admit this. And I guess, a decade later, it's a lot easier to accept that that was 100% my fault. I mismanaged my feelings. I mismanaged my blood sugars. And I didn't grieve in a way that was going to help me. Because all I know is when I woke up in that hospital bed, not only did I lose my mom, but I almost lost myself. And that's a scary thing when you grieve to the point where you no longer care about yourself. But I was very fortunate. I had a great family connection. My brother's always been so loyal and there for me. My boyfriend was so loyal and there for me. And like I said, I ended up marrying that man, and we've been together for over a decade now. And he is the main reason why I got myself together, because I never wanted him to experience that again. Um, being a diabetic who found her mom like that quite a few times, I know that level of trauma can really play into your mind. And just knowing that I made my husband feel that way still makes me feel terrible, and still makes me want to work harder towards never letting him see that again. So my sugars were 900. I'm in the hospital. I ended up staying there for quite some time. And after being discharged, I had to go through home health care just because I wasn't allowed to drive. I was having trouble walking. I was so swollen with fluid, and I felt so sick that I needed a home health aide to check in on me to make sure I was doing okay. The doctor set me up on antidepressants, got me set up with a therapist, and from there I was able to see more of the yellow brick road as to where I needed to go. And even after that, it took me some time to get to the point that I'm at today. It took me a few years to get the Dexcom. And then just recently, I got the insulin pump, which now I've really made such a huge turn with my blood sugars, especially from where I used to be, that it's amazing. I wanted to come on here and share that story with you because the reason I take such good care of myself now is because I know what it feels like to not take such good care of myself. And I never want to be a content creator on YouTube that portrays that I am 100% perfect. But now that I've known what it feels like to have my sugar at 900 and in the hospital and not being able to take care of myself, in acute kidney failure as a 21-year-old, I don't feel like it's worth it for me to even tempt myself with ice creams and sugars and treats. I instead find diabetic alternatives because it's just never worth it for me and my family to ever experience that ever again. Now, do I like ice cream? Yes, I do. But I eat the diabetic friendly ice cream. Do I like cake? Absolutely. I eat the diabetic friendly version. I never put myself in a position of indulging in those high sugar sweets or those high carbs because I'm just afraid of the potential outcome, which probably just means in my own mind, I'm just still messed up, just trying to work through the trauma that we've been through with all of that. And I know that this has happened to not just me, that diabetics everywhere have experienced probably something so similar. DKA, diabetic ketoacidosis, is pretty common, but it just really throws you for a loop when you go through it. But I wanted to pop on here and just share a little bit about my backstory. And hopefully it brings some light into your life and helps you understand a little bit more about me and my diabetic journey. I know everyone has their own story, and if you'd like to, leave a comment down below a little bit about your story, because I'd love to hear it. So thank you for checking me out today. I really appreciate it. Make sure you give this video a thumbs up. I know it was kind of a depressing story, so I apologize for that, but it kind of ended up being an inspirational story because just like fairy tales, things aren't always like a fairy tale. Sometimes you have to go through the crap to get to the good part. So thanks for coming by today. I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.